Why do the religious constantly lie to themselves and everyone else about their gods? Because they're desperate and delusional. They are terrified to actually live in reality because reality isn't the imaginary happy land that they really wish it would be. And my answer to that is too bad. You have to learn to deal with reality on reality's terms because you don't really have a choice, do you? But the religious never will. These people need serious help. Today, we're going to do an Andy Bannister video without Andy Bannister. I mean, it's on his channel, but he's not actually in it. Instead, we get Steve Osmond, whoever he is, and I guess we can compare his lunacy to Andy's to see which one is more sane, or less sane as the case may be. So he poses a question: what if God isn't real? Now, I've got my own take on that, but let's see where this goes.
What if God isn't real?
Then you stop believing in this imaginary God thing of yours and you go on about your life. That's honestly how people ought to treat everything that they experience. Well, if we're going to be really super honest, people shouldn't believe anything without corroboratory evidence in the first place, so this isn't a question that would ever be asked. It's like saying, what if Harry Potter isn't real? Well, he's not, so why are you bothering to ask the question? Of course, the religious, they can't get that through their heads, so let's go on and let Steve explain. I'm willing to bet everything he says is going to be dumb, but let's see.
Well, this is a really good question. What if God isn't there? What if he doesn't exist at all? Are there any kind of implications or repercussions for us in our real world lives if God isn't there?
And here we see what I suspected all along. We're going to get a whole ton of consequentialism where he takes what he believes to be true and then says, but the world would be horrible if it wasn't real, so I'm going to continue to believe. But that doesn't actually mean anything, does it? Your desires do not color reality at all. It is what it is. How you feel about it doesn't matter. But we see this thing all the time, don't we? The religious get really emotionally attached to how they feel about their beliefs, not the actual reality of their beliefs themselves. And they'd much rather maintain that feeling and not worry at all about the truth. This is the fallacy from consequences, where the truth of a proposition is determined by whether its premise leads to desirable or undesirable consequences, not by whether or not it's actually true. And yes, it is absolutely as dumb as it sounds.
Well, I think it's obvious that if God isn't there, then Christianity and Judaism and Islam and any other worldview that is based on there being a God is obviously false.
Notice what he did there? He leapt from, my God isn't real, to no gods are real, with no evidence to back that up. Granted, we don't believe in any gods because no gods have any evidence, but he's just trying to move the goalposts so that there are no gods and all religions are automatically false. However, if the Christian God didn't exist, then that only affects Christianity and other related religions. It wouldn't do anything at all to Hinduism or other non-Christian, non-Abrahamic religions because you didn't declare that those gods weren't true. I just wanted to point out the inherent dishonesty that these people have. Granted, we're going to just go ahead and go with it because this is going to prove his fallacious thinking even better. But as I keep saying, you have to watch the words that come out of these people's mouths because they are very rarely ever honest and virtually never rational. So let's get right back to it.
But that's not really helpful. Let's think of some other things. Think of morality, for instance.
Yes, let's. Morality doesn't rely on the existence of any gods as it is. Yes, I know that he believes it, but that certainly doesn't make it true. Morality in the real world is based on a combination of enlightened self-interest and empathy. You want to be treated a certain way, therefore you treat others that way in hopes that they will reciprocate. You understand that others feel the same things that you do, not necessarily in the same way, but they feel pain, they feel sadness, they feel joy. And because you want all of the good things and none of the bad things, you understand that they do too. No, it doesn't always work out that way, but it does in the overwhelming majority of cases, so we just make that assumption and usually it's right. That's morality. No gods required.
The notion that there are certain things that are really right and really wrong.
There aren't, though. There are things that, collectively, society has determined are going to be considered right or considered wrong within the confines of that society. Nothing is really right or really wrong because there is no objective morality in the first place. Now, a lot of people lose sight of that simple fact. They just really want it to be true. They start to think that because they are only exposed to one version of morality, the one in the society that they were indoctrinated into and face every single day, that everybody in the whole world is exactly the same way. Now, for some things, that's most likely true because humans tend to want similar things. Nobody wants to starve to death. Nobody wants to be tortured, or at least hardly anybody does. So that's a pretty safe bet on those things that humans experience in common. But when they go further and assume that absolutely everybody agrees on absolutely everything, that is simply not true. Every society has its own rules. Some might be similar, but some are very, very different. Nobody gets to say that their views are the absolute right views and everybody else is wrong. But let's be honest, a lot of people just can't help themselves, can they? They really are that dumb.
Well, without God, it means that we're just the product of blind, random evolutionary chance. We're just the matter that we are, the physical stuff, and there's nothing really behind that or further than that.
And thus, the consequentialism begins. Because that is what is actually going on here. Steve doesn't like it, so he appeals to something else to get that dopamine hit in the head that he's really after. But in reality, that's what's actually going on. We are just matter in motion, as they like to say. We are just evolved animals. It doesn't matter if you like that fact or not, it's still true. Religion is often a means to escape an uncomfortable reality, but at the end of the day, reality still exists, and you still have to learn to deal with it somehow. The religious just don't want to, which is why they spin all these emotionally comforting yarns and play make-believe. But really, so what? You are still just an evolved animal that has to make its way through the world that actually exists, the world that it actually inhabits. You need to grow up and learn to deal.
So to really think that there is actually real right and real wrong doesn't work. It all just boils down to being relative, your perspective or mine.
Which, whether you like it or not, is how reality works. Then we take those perspectives and collectively decide what we're going to agree with on the one hand and disagree with on the other. We codify those moral views into laws, and then we hold people accountable for their actions under that law. Hopefully, at least, because it doesn't always work out that way, does it? Your feelings don't matter, but that's really all the religious have, right? They just want it to be true, but that doesn't make it true. This is really where these people have problems because they simply can't come to grips with the reality that they actually live in. They live in fear of the real world, so they just make something up they like better and pretend that's real, but it isn't. All of humanity could go extinct right now. It just takes the right plague or an errant asteroid or a million other things. If things go wrong, we all die. Welcome to the real world. They can't handle that, so they play make-believe like immature little children, hiding under the covers from the monster in the closet. They've got problems. They really do.
What about human rights? Without God, we don't really have a solid grounding for human rights.
Human rights were just made up by us. All rights were just made up by us. I think we're going to come back to this point over and over and over again. He's looking for an invisible father figure in the sky to take care of all of his problems, and I'm sorry, but it just doesn't work like that. Rights are what we invent for ourselves and for other things, and they demonstrably change over time. That's why Christians have such a hard time dealing with slavery in the Bible. Back then, it was perfectly acceptable. Now, it's not. But they desperately want to believe that rights, like morals, are universal and eternal, and they're just wrong about that. That's not how any of this works, not that they actually care. Because, as I said before, these are just immature children who have never grown up and learned to deal with the reality in which they live. They're still looking for a mommy and a daddy that will take care of them forever and ever and always and not let anything bad happen. And I'm sorry, but that's just an illusion. It doesn't actually exist.
Again, if we're just the product of blind, random evolutionary chance, then why think that we're better than any other animal? I think that's quite speciesist, actually.
We're not. We're different, just like other animals are different from us, but we're not better. Better in what way? Are we smarter? Arguably, maybe, but we're not faster. We can't fly. We can't swim as well as other animals. We can't live in the wide variety of habitats that other animals do with ease. It's only been our technological abilities that have allowed us to live in as wide a range as we do. Otherwise, we'd still be stuck near the equator where it's warm. We are not better. We're just different. And I know that you'll get people acting every bit as emotionally saying, well, that means we should treat other animals better. Yeah, maybe in some ways, but we're all still animals. When a lion rips apart a gazelle to eat it, they're just doing what nature programmed them to do. When we have a hamburger, we're doing the same thing. Although I guess it's not nearly as messy, but that's what we are doing. That's all we are. We are omnivores. Screaming that you shouldn't eat meat is absurd because that's what your physiology evolved to do. Learn to deal. A lot of people out there really need to try.
But the Bible, I think, teaches that humans are different, that we're made in the image of God, and because of that we have special value and dignity and purpose, and we're loved and known by God.
Nobody cares about your stupid book. See, this is just ego. It's the desire to be special without actually being special. Because you're not in the grand scheme of things anyhow. You are no more and no less than any other evolved animal on the planet, which just so happens to permit such things. Just because you really want to be special, that doesn't mean that you are. You live in the real world whether you like it or not, and that's something you need to learn to deal with. And this goes for everyone, not just the religious, because there are a lot of non-religious people out there who have this problem too. Your happiness doesn't mean a thing to reality. Reality has no capacity whatsoever to know or care. You don't get to just insist that reality bends to your whims because you're going to get soundly disappointed. It's not going to happen. I don't know how much more on this there is to say, but a lot of people seem to have serious issues. And for all of those people, religious and non-religious alike, I think it's time to stop and grow the hell up.
But for me, the rubber really hits the road when I think of hope. If there is no God, then there is no hope for the world to get any better.
Sure there is. We are better off today than we have ever been at any other point in history. We live longer, we are healthier, and unfortunately, we breed more than at any other point in time. That is improvement, no gods required. It's just realistic improvement, which the religious just don't want. They want magic. They want utopia, and that's simply not real. We're going to continue to be born, live, and die as we always have been, and if we can make things a little more comfortable for ourselves in the interim, well, that's improvement. At most points in history, you were constantly sick and injured and miserable, day in and day out, year in and year out, and today, that's just not true for the overwhelming majority of people, especially in the Western world. And if history's any guide, tomorrow is going to be marginally better than today. And hopefully, the day after that, and after that, and after that. Welcome to the real world.
Because we're just stuck in this perpetual cycle. We're stuck in the brokenness of things. And for me, there's no hope in the midst of suffering because it all is just the way it is. And if there is no God, it is just the blind, pitiless indifference that we're faced with, as one author put it.
And you notice how he put that, right? It's how he feels. Not how it is, not how the world actually works. He's after comfort, and that's just dumb. The world isn't here to cater to you. You have to learn how to live in the world that you actually do, because you are not special. Stop making a fool of yourself. Yet this is how a lot of people are, religious and non-religious alike, right? They just want to be special, and they want to be happy all the time and living in luxury and all that. And when something goes wrong, they scream at the sky that life isn't fair. Well, of course it isn't. Where the hell did you get the stupid idea that it was? If I found out tomorrow that I had cancer, I wouldn't be screaming at the sky because I don't have the unrealistic expectation that life is fair. It is what it is. Biology does what biology does. I'll do what I can do in the meantime, but ultimately, the real world is going to win no matter what I might want to happen. My desires don't matter. Only reality does. And more people need to get that through their heads. Maybe then we'd get rid of the absurdity that is religion.
But what if there is a God? Well, that changes things. I would put that question to you if you've never really thought about this. Instead of thinking, well, what if God isn't real? Let me put it back to you. What if God is real?
And we're back to playing wishful thinking games, right? Because that's all they can ever do. They desperately want some things to be true, even though they're demonstrably not, and that's why they invent these imaginary father figures in the sky. It means no more than, what if invisible, intangible, universe-creating pixies were real? Who cares? Without evidence to back any of that up, it is not even worth considering. Just because you really like the idea, that doesn't make the idea true, and it's the truth that matters, not your personal comfort. Because a lot of these people are just self-centered and ridiculously egotistical. They don't care what's real, so long as they get that warm, fuzzy feeling inside that makes them tingle. And I really don't want to hear about your tingle. Learn to deal with what is. You won't look nearly so dumb if you can manage to do that.
Then we have a solid foundation for believing that there are objective moral values and duties. What do I mean by that?
We'll get back to that one in a second, because all he's doing here is taking the stuff he really, really wishes was true and just making up stories so he can get there without any of it actually being real. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you wish. Now, I'm reminded of an old chick comic I saw once, and it's been decades, so I might get this a little wrong, but it had a little girl who was starving on the street, and she's dying in a cardboard box. And she finds a pamphlet or something about Jesus and gets saved and goes to paradise after she dies. If somebody knows which one that is and wants to link to it below, that would be great. But that's how the religious actually work, unfortunately. They are the dying little girl in the cardboard box on the cruel streets. Just because in their heads they accept the existence of an imaginary savior, that doesn't mean that their life is going to be automatically getting better. The little girl, she still died. Jesus didn't save her in any demonstrable way. It's just a fantasy cooked up by conmen and lunatics because they desperately want there to be more than there actually is. But there isn't. There's no evidence whatsoever to support any of it. You don't get to just invent your own reality in your head, because that just makes you look like an idiot.
I mean that there are certain things that are really right and really wrong because they are grounded in the character and existence of God.
That's your claim, but that's all it is. You can't back up that your God exists at all, much less has any of the characteristics that you seem to think that he does. That's the problem, though. This is all imaginary. This is, but I really, really, really want it to be true. So what? That is not how reality works. You have to learn to deal with the world that you're actually living in. Change what you can and accept what you can't, because you really don't have a choice. Your feelings don't matter, and that's a really, really hard thing for a lot of people to understand, much less embrace. You really aren't that important. Neither am I. Neither is anyone. It's time you grew the hell up and dealt with that fact, because it's never ever going away, no matter how delusional you get.
And again, as I've mentioned, we are valuable as people, as humans, because we're made in the image of God.
Says who? Because again, he's just appealing to consequences. But you really want to be special, right? Therefore, he can just try to sell you on his whole load of rubbish that isn't actually so in any demonstrable way, because it gets you where he and perhaps you really want to go. But that doesn't mean anything. Your feelings mean nothing. Your comfort means nothing. That chemical rush in your head means nothing when it comes to the actual reality that you really live in. You're just lying to yourself, and a lot of people do, but it's still stupid. If you can't manage to get through the day without being internally dishonest, then you've got problems. You are a weak-willed and weak-minded individual. You need to be better. Seek some professional help, because clearly you need it.
And that means human rights have a solid grounding because they're grounded in the existence and the character of God.
But your God is an asshole, as I already showed in the previous slavery example. Morality and human rights are not grounded in anything but the minds of the religiously deluded. It doesn't matter what you want to be true. It doesn't matter what stories you invent to help you along the way. It matters only what is actually going on in the world you actually inhabit, and it doesn't seem to be any of the farcical fantasy stories you tell yourself. The only thing that matters is what's actually going on, and if you can't grow up and learn to deal with it, then the problem is you. And maybe it's time you did something about that.
And hope. We have a solid foundation for hope because we know that there is a God out there who sees us, who knows us, who loves us, and as the Bible teaches, is one day coming back to make all things right and wipe away every tear.
And that's just the lie that your religion tells you to keep you in line and fill in their collection plates. There are tons of implied threats in religion. Do what we tell you to do, or you're gonna burn in hell forever. Yeah, prove it. Because they can't, and they know it. That's why they place all of the rewards conveniently where nobody can verify they actually exist, and all of the punishments after death when nobody can come back and tell you they're really there. This is not done by chance, but by design. They know it's bullshit. They have to. Every cult leader in history has done the same thing. If they can't get away with abusing you in the here and now, and some have certainly, then they issue impotent threats about what's going to happen to you in the afterlife if you don't do what they say here. Seriously, what's wrong with the people who fall for this? They're stupid, just like the Steve guy.
So if you've not considered it before, I challenge you. Think about this. What if God is real?
What if Krishna is real? What if Zeus is real? What if the flying spaghetti monster is real? Why limit yourself to this guy's God? Because that's all he cares about, of course. His own delusions and his own wallet, because he's getting paid to say this crap to gullible people watching the channel. He's sure not doing any of this stuff for free, is he? It's a way to dodge dealing with reality, and that's positively stupid, isn't it? So, anyway, what do you think of this not Andy Bannister guy? Did he have anything intelligent to say at all, or is he just pandering to the emotional insecurity of the believer? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I am never impressed by any of this. It all starts off with, what if, but then he turns it around because he desperately wants it to be true. But that doesn't make it true. It's why we keep having these problems with the religious, because they can't tell the difference between their overactive fantasy life and reality, because they're afraid of reality. They can't set their feelings aside and just go with the demonstrable facts. They can't accept the real world that exists right outside their door. They don't care, and so long as that's the case, they will just keep making fools of themselves because they can't handle the world that they're actually a part of. They will go through the only life they actually have, wasting it by believing in imaginary friends in the sky. I don't know about you, but I find that terribly sad.